At the verge of death, a girl who's never once been able to feel happiness witnesses the beginning of the end. Looking straight into the eyes of a killer's gun, she awaits for the last of her consciousness to slip away. When she opens her eyes, she feels the touch of his hand, opening her eyes to her first ever meal. The man who saved her is a hitman, making a living off of ending the lives of others, and yet he chose to save this girl. This manga is a terrible hitman and picked up girl, a story much deeper than what I anticipated going into it. Those first 2 pages alone make for such a strong start, and yet it's the dynamic of the hitman and the girl that make them such an endearing pair. The hitman is eccentric, being able to read the girl's longing for death with ease, but being unable to anticipate that she'd take his joke about killing her seriously. The girl is all kinds of weird, with her troubled life giving her the goal of being killed by the hitman, although he tells her that she needs to live through more first. Given his job, raising a kid isn't exactly convenient, or a thing he'd want to put her through despite her willingness to put herself in danger. This is the hook of the manga, as it explores a man who only lived for one purpose, eventually finding meaning in something. The man who wrote this story is Rimukuro, the creator of Senko-san and Show Me Your Love, the latter of which I've already covered. I think Rimukuro is a wonderful mangaka, his works tackling themes of finding a balance between your livelihood and relationships. This manga is no different, but it does so through the lens of a found family story instead of a romance. The thing that stands out the most, however, is how short this manga is, only having 10 chapters, all of which being below 10 pages in length. It's why I'd suggest giving it a read either before or after finishing this video. A spoiler warning is imperative here, given how I'll be discussing the entire manga. The manga starts by putting its early focus into showing how they begin to grow closer to one another. It all starts with a hitman giving her a place to sleep, realizing that seeing the warmth of someone's face can bring him more happiness than he could possibly imagine. But he has to come to his senses and realize that he can't keep this up for much longer. For the sake of his job, he can't grow soft. He can't second guess the value of human life. If he did, he'd have to put just one thought into his own. But it happens. His boss tells him that he needs to protect the girl, this being the first time he's ever had to deal with such a task. For the sake of the mission, the girl can't die, and with this great strength comes the assurance that no harm will ever come her way. The hitman doesn't think he should bring someone so innocent into his world, but reluctantly accepts. With the deal being made, everyone grows into their new roles in life. The girl has become acquainted with the hitman's boss and asks her to unfold the mystery of who he is. According to her, the hitman's greatest strength is his non-existent fear toward death. Feeling unworthy of being loved for the murders he's committed, he keeps on killing in the hopes that he'll eventually die along the way. But now, for the first time in his life, he fears death since he has something to live for. Coming home from a mission worried for the safety of the girl. When he sees her having made a meal for him, he lights up, his nerves calming away. Where this manga shines is in the subject matter it does such a good job at covering. Rimukuro shines best by being able to tackle the subject of a work-life balance in varying ways. Senko-san is a story about a man who hates his abusive job, eventually getting pushed into having the strength to stand up for himself by the constant care he gets from Senko. Meanwhile, Show Me Your Love is a story about a lonely mangaka who finds new meaning through her work after having fallen in love with someone. I mentioned last time that despite Nakano and Shoujo having very different levels of passion for what they do, that they're still in similar predicaments. The hitman leans closer to Nakano on the scale. He may not be getting abused by those above him, but his job puts him in a moral gray area. He may be killing others for the greater good, but murder is still fundamentally an immoral thing to do. For as much as he could justify it, he can't bring himself to as he continues to age. As his victims grow, so does his guilt. That's what brought him to saving the girl. He knew it would cause him more trouble, but for once in his life, he wanted to do unambiguous good for someone. This want to be kind puts the hitman in a position where, despite being more like Nakano, he acts more like Senko. This is where the girl comes in. She's someone who can't fend for herself, and it forces the hitman to think about someone else for the first time, and be that light that inspires change in someone. I definitely prefer the dynamics in Senko-san, but I appreciate the much deeper level of equality between the girl and the hitman. They're both getting something meaningful from their bond. The hitman finally being able to love somebody, and the girl finally being able to receive love. Eventually, the girl starts joining the hitman on missions. Despite his fear for her safety, he deems it necessary to teach her how to defend herself from the same people she'd been victim to in the past. Granted, it was against his will that she started using these skills to help him. Having been saved by him, she feels the need to give back his kindness, and it's genuinely fun seeing them banter. With her growing stronger and the two of them getting closer, she starts talking back to him, and it's fun to see them reach that point. The rest of the manga is like this too. After several chapters, the girl is finally brave enough to venture out on her own. We get to see her training on display as she defends herself from a group of thugs, only for the hitman to wash away the conflict, telling them not to mess with his daughter. It's so adorable seeing his reaction to being called Papa. At this point of the manga, they're only calling each other father and daughter so they don't have to explain the hitman stuff to people. But you can also tell that they're really starting to care for one another, and it's so heartwarming to see. It all comes to a halt, however, and this extremely important moment. For just one moment, the girl let herself be away from the hitman, and he got himself injured to a great extent. As he thinks of drawing his last breaths, he tells her that he's proud to have raised such a good daughter. When he wakes up, he's embarrassed at his dramatic final words, but the girl lets him know just how much they meant to her, and it sparks a change in his heart. It may have taken him forever to realize it, but for the first time ever, there's someone who would be sad to see him go. I really love this moment. It's extremely impactful to the story, and it's what caused the turning point for the really satisfying ending that we'll get to later. However, I just can't ignore its main flaw, since it'll undoubtedly be something that affects your enjoyment if you decide to read through it. This is pretty easily Ramukuro's weakest work, and the short length is the main culprit. For as much as I love how easy it is to read through it in one sitting, it also means that a lot of that subtle development that is part of what makes Senko-san so good is missed out on. Sure, I don't need or even want it to be as a slow burn as Senko-san, given how this manga was meant to be short, which is why I think longer chapters, around the standard 20 pages, would have allowed for a lot more room to build a dynamic between the characters. It would make the time jump between chapters 3 and 4 feel less jarring. It would mean that less things would be told instead of shown. Like, I really wanted to see an example of the hitman using his job to throw his life away. And while it works to have his boss explain that, exposition like that just isn't enough to make me truly feel what he's going through. The accident he gets into may be one of the manga's most impactful moments, but it could have been better built up to, and it sucks that I had to feel that level of conflict with my enjoyment of the story. The lack of a backstory or an explanation for why he feels the way he does also makes it harder to understand why he believes the way he does. It's something that I can live without, but I do feel like the manga would have benefited from it. The main thing that gets missed out on, though, is getting those good interactions between the girl and the hitman. I like the development of their dynamic a lot, and I think they're a really fun pair. A quiet girl with a sharp tongue is a fun contrast with a passionate man who crumbles socially. It's such a good idea, and yet the story has to be told too quickly to show us much of it. The plot itself is fine, I'd argue it's great, and yet this is the only one of Ramukuro's stories where I would call the characters underwhelming, which is unfortunate both because it's something he's genuinely good at, and also because this manga really didn't need to turn out that way. If you can put any criticisms into the back of your mind, though, you'll get to witness a truly beautiful ending to a story that's only a single volume in length. While the hitman had a very specific purpose to his murders, that purpose has now run its course, and he takes on his last mission, reasoning that he doesn't want to die before the girl grows up. Worrying for his safety, the girl decides to catch up to him, wanting him to finally see her as an equal. Hearing this, the boss approves, and lets her help the man who saved her life. Having caught up to him, the girl and the hitman had to deal with target after target. The girl chastises the hitman for throwing his life away at his job, but he assures her that he won't die. For the first time in his life, he confidently tells her the words she wanted to hear most, that he has a reason to live. He doesn't want to drag his daughter into this, but she assures him that their family must stick together, that it's her turn to save him. Having gotten their last kill, the hitman finally tells his daughter how proud he is of her achievements, her smile being the end of the chapter. There's an epilogue chapter after this, but I consider chapter 9 to be the true end of this manga. It's when the character arcs for both the girl and the hitman end. Earlier, I discussed how having to help someone changes the hitman's worldview. Even in the earliest chapters, he'd get flustered when the girl called him her hero or mentioned how he saved her. This is because he doesn't want to acknowledge that he's a good person. If he did, it would only make him feel worse for his assassinations. But he also can't stop himself from helping her. He cooks her meals, he helps her fight, and he gives her the courage to go outside on her own. Gradually, she starts giving back to him. She learns his favorite recipes, goes on missions with him, and helps him with other tasks. These are two broken people with holes in their hearts, and yet it's by being forced to interact that their kindness gives them meaning in life. Last time, I asked the question of why we create. Show Me Your Love is a story about how building strong relationships helps fuel creativity. A Terrible Hitman and Picked Up Girl is a story about how building strong relationships helps build strength, kindness, and sanity. The thing I love most about Rimukuro's best work, Senko-san, is how well it displays the ripple effect of kindness. Senko's goal was only to help one person, and yet it was through helping him that Nakano was able to help so many more people. The hitman does this too with his kindness to better the life of a girl who has never once received it, returning the favor to the point where the story can end with both of them agreeing to help their boss one last time in chapter 10. This story is truly beautiful, as it shows why it's important to treat others well. Who knows, maybe if you decide to help someone, you can get pushed to realize what you really need. Beyond just that though, what I think this manga does so well is showing how abandoning that loneliness can truly change your life. I apologize if this gets dark, but it wasn't hard for me to relate to the hitman. I was depressed all throughout middle and high school, and I thought I was a bad person that someone would be a fool to love. This resulted in me not taking my life very seriously. For the longest time, it would only go as far as thoughts of ending my own life, but I'd always get talked out of it. This changed when I got a car for my 18th birthday. Based on my personality, my parents assumed I wouldn't be reckless, but I was. When you're in high school, you feel trapped. If you hate your life at school, then you're shit out of luck. Driving was the first time I ever felt truly free. But if I ever drove the speed limit or got stuck in traffic, it would be a cruel reminder of how powerless I was. By the time I graduated, this feeling of powerlessness was waning, but since I was jobless at the time with little experience as an adult, I still hadn't realized that the freedom I loved so much came at a devastating cost. I was on the rainy freeway, driving over 100 miles per hour while blasting Bon Appetit S on a piece of shit Mercury. I paid no mind to it for such a long time, but then I hit a turn, refused to slow down, and lost control of the wheel. I've never had a moment in my life more surreal than when my car flipped over 3 times. Miraculously, I wasn't harmed to the point where I wish I refused going to the hospital because Jesus Christ, those bills are insane. But even though I left it physically unharmed, the mental wounds will never truly disappear. When I saw the hitman almost die, his life flashing before his eyes, it reminded me of what I had to go through that day. Like the hitman, I also had a lack of fear for my fate because I felt like the world would be better without me. I know better now, of course. Like any person, I've continued to have negative experiences in my life. But it was going through such a tragic event that forced me to fear death. It forced me to seriously look at every aspect of my life and make me realize the things I love doing and why I love doing them, and the people who love me and why they love me. It was after months of coming to terms with all this that I came to the conclusion for the first time of my life. I will never ever kill myself, because there's always something or someone to live for. But why do I mention this? Well, it's because I only scratched the surface of why the manga is so good. Of course, kindness builds more kindness. A toddler can understand that. The more complex message of this manga is that you may not be as shitty as you think. No matter what you may think, I can assure you that someone loves you. It's yet another message that may seem obvious, but depression can blind you from the most obvious things. It's why it took me almost my entire life to come to a conclusion that seems so clear, and why it took the Hitman even longer. It'd be easy to say that I made this video to ride the wave of success I had with my last work. Sure, I'm discussing another one of Rimukuro's work partly because of how well the last video did, but I'm mainly making it to make a point of just how underrated Rimukuro's work truly is. Under the guise of the cutesy art styles and the ridiculous plot summaries, you get works that explore subject matter deeper than they have any right to. It really pains me to be one of the few as infatuated with his work as I am. And sure, nothing he makes is perfect. I can acknowledge that these 3 manga are more flawed than what I normally hold dear to me, but it almost makes it feel more human to me. It's not like it's possible to make anything perfect anyhow, and while my favorites tend to be work that chases that perfection, I appreciate how Rimukuro lets you take a step back and relax to a story that tells you something similarly meaningful without the brainpower needed to understand it. Sure, The Terrible Hitman and Picked Up Girl is my least favorite of his work, and I only think he's made one true masterpiece, but something doesn't need to be your favorite anime or manga for you to appreciate it. This manga may only be a 7 out of 10, but I still got something meaningful out of it, and it's what makes analyzing the work of my favorite mangakas so much fun. Thanks for watching this one. I always try to make improvements to each and every video I make, so I hope those go appreciated. Most of those improvements are writing related, deciding to add in a prologue to hook viewers in, and jumping between summary and analysis to make the video more engaging. A lot of YouTubers don't do the whole talking about the video thing anymore, which I find understandable. It's not really good writing, and it tends to feel disconnected from the rest of the video. But I do it anyway, since it makes the video feel more personal. I don't like how fake a lot of YouTubers are, which is why I bring an abundantly honest and personal swing to what I make. It leads to some pitfalls, but it also leads to me having more passionate supporters as well. The most passionate of which are my patrons, such as my Phantom tier patrons Mystic Owl, Jesse, and Squizzy, and my Confidant tier patrons Regimania, Plasma, Eternum, and Ghoul. Thank you very much for your continued support on my videos. If you want amazing benefits such as a private Discord server, over 300 scrapped video ideas, 500 unlisted videos, early access to my videos, and my entire Google Drive, you can find it on Patreon. With all that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you as soon as I can.